When Sarah closed her eyes for the last time, she thought she'd rest in peace. Her life had been a symphony of sacrifices, a melody she played for others, never for herself. She was the dutiful wife, the perfect best friend, and the ever-reliable woman who placed everyone's happiness above her own. But on the day she lay on her deathbed, her world shattered. Her husband, Ethan, and her lifelong best friend, Claire, whispered their confessions over her still body, unaware that she could hear every word. "It's a shame she never found out," Claire said, a sly smirk in her voice. "She gave up everything for me," Ethan replied. "But she was so naive." "I've always loved you, Claire." Those words echoed in Sarah's mind as her heart gave out. Betrayed by the two people she had trusted most, she felt her world collapse into darkness. When she opened her eyes again, she wasn't in heaven, or hell. She was standing in the body of her younger self, 15 years earlier, on the very day her engagement to Ethan had been announced. It was a second chance. A chance to rewrite her destiny. To unmask their lies, seize her own happiness, and turn their betrayal into her greatest triumph.
Chapter 1, A Second Chance. Sarah woke up to the familiar smell of lavender soap and the soft glow of the morning sun streaming through her bedroom window. Her heart raced as she sat up abruptly, her mind reeling. She glanced around, taking in the room that she hadn't seen in over a decade, a room she had left behind in her youth. The pastel walls, the stuffed teddy bear on the corner shelf, the tiny desk cluttered with notebooks, it all felt surreal. She quickly got out of bed and rushed to the mirror. Staring back at her was a younger version of herself, with unlined skin, bright eyes, and long, wavy chestnut hair cascading down her shoulders. She gasped, touching her face as though it might disappear. "What's happening? Am I dreaming?" Memories of her past life flooded her mind. The betrayal, the heartbreak, and the moment she'd closed her eyes for what she thought was the last time, all of it came rushing back with vivid clarity. Ethan's voice echoed in her head, as clear as it had been on her deathbed, "I've always loved Claire." Her chest tightened at the memory of her husband's confession, spoken to her best friend over her still body. But now, she was here, in the body of her 20-year-old self, on the day her engagement to Ethan was to be announced. She remembered this day clearly, the day she'd begun the journey of sacrificing everything for him. In her previous life, she had overlooked the small moments that should have been red flags. Ethan's stolen glances at Claire, their inside jokes, the way Claire lingered just a bit too long when hugging him, all dismissed as her own insecurities. But not this time. This time, she wasn't the naive, trusting woman she had been. This time, she had the knowledge of their betrayal and a chance to rewrite her fate. A knock on the door startled her. "Sarah, honey, are you awake?" her mother's cheerful voice called from the other side. Sarah quickly composed herself. "Yes, Mom. I'll be down in a minute," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. She turned back to the mirror, her reflection now a source of resolve rather than shock. "This is my second chance," she whispered to herself. "This time, I won't let them use me." As she descended the stairs, the house buzzed with excitement. Family and friends filled the living room, chatting about the upcoming engagement party. In the center of it all stood Ethan, his charming smile captivating everyone around him. Claire was by his side, her laughter ringing out like a bell. Sarah's stomach churned, but she forced a radiant smile and approached them. "Ethan," she said sweetly, "you look nervous. Big day, huh?" Ethan chuckled, reaching for her hand. "Only because I want everything to be perfect for you." Sarah held his gaze, her smile unwavering. "Oh, I'm sure it will be." Inside, she was no longer the woman blinded by love. She was a woman on a mission, ready to unmask their lies and reclaim her life. Chapter 2, The Beginning of the Game. Sarah navigated the engagement party with practiced grace, her every move calculated. She smiled warmly, laughed when expected, and played the role of a radiant fiancée. Beneath her composed exterior, however, her mind was in overdrive. She scanned the room, watching Ethan and Claire interact with sharp precision. Ethan was his usual charming self, mingling with guests and ensuring everyone was entertained. His hand brushed hers often, a public display of affection meant to cement the illusion of their love. Claire lingered nearby, always within sight, always laughing at his jokes, her touch far too casual for a mere friend. Sarah's resolve solidified as she noticed the subtle glances they exchanged when they thought no one was looking. How many years did I ignore this? She thought bitterly. How blind was I to the obvious? Sarah, you must be thrilled, one of her aunts gushed, pulling her into a hug. Ethan is such a catch. And Claire has been such a wonderful friend, helping with all the planning. You're so lucky to have her. Sarah's smile didn't falter. Yes, Claire has been a huge help. I don't know what I'd do without her. The words tasted bitter, but she delivered them with the perfect mix of gratitude and sincerity. Across the room, Claire caught her eye and waved. Sarah returned the gesture, her expression warm and inviting. Inside, she was already planning her next move. She needed to let them feel secure, to let them believe she was as naive and trusting as before. Later, when the crowd had thinned and the music played softly in the background, Sarah approached Claire, who was standing by the refreshment table. Ethan was on the other side of the room, engrossed in a conversation. Claire, Sarah began, her voice friendly, thank you for being here today. It means a lot to me. Claire smiled, her expression a little too smug for Sarah's liking. Of course, Sarah. Anything for you. Sarah tilted her head, feigning curiosity. You and Ethan have such a strong friendship. It's rare to see that between a fiancé and a best friend. You're like family to us. Claire's smile faltered for just a second before she recovered. We've always been close, but nothing more than that. You know that, right? Sarah's heart burned with anger, but she forced a light laugh. Of course. I've never doubted it for a second. As she walked away, she glanced back to see Claire watching her, a flicker of unease in her expression. Good, Sarah thought. Let her wonder. When Ethan joined her later, Sarah slipped her arm through his. Did you and Claire have a chance to catch up today? Ethan hesitated for a fraction of a second before answering. Not much. It's been a busy day. Sarah smiled sweetly. I'm glad. I'd hate for you to feel distracted. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and Sarah knew it was only a matter of time before they began to grow. This time, she wouldn't be the victim of their lies, she would be their undoing. Chapter 3, Secrets Beneath the Surface. The days following the engagement party were a whirlwind of preparations. Sarah threw herself into planning, ensuring her schedule was filled with meetings, phone calls, and tasks that required Ethan and Claire's involvement. It was the perfect opportunity to observe them more closely, and Sarah quickly realized how deep their deception ran. One afternoon, as Sarah finalized flower arrangements at the local boutique, she noticed Ethan texting someone. His lips curled into a faint smile, the kind he used to save for moments he claimed were only for her. She glanced at the screen just before he locked it. The name, Claire, flashed briefly, and her heart clenched. Who's that? She asked casually, though her tone carried a subtle edge. Oh, just Claire, Ethan replied, slipping his phone into his pocket. She's helping coordinate the guest list for the wedding. Sarah nodded, her expression calm despite the storm brewing inside her. She's always been so helpful, hasn't she? I'm lucky to have both of you. Ethan's smile wavered slightly, but he quickly recovered. Of course, we're here for you. Later that evening, Sarah decided to pay Claire a surprise visit. She needed answers, and Claire's carefully constructed facade would likely crumble under unexpected pressure. Carrying a bottle of wine and an air of cheerful spontaneity, Sarah knocked on Claire's apartment door. "Sarah! What a surprise!" Claire greeted her with a slightly forced smile, her voice just a tad too high-pitched. "I thought we could have a girls' night," Sarah said, holding up the wine. "It's been so long since we've just talked, you know." Claire hesitated for a moment before stepping aside. "Of course. Come in." The apartment was immaculate, almost as though Claire had been expecting company. Sarah's eyes scanned the room, noting small details she hadn't paid attention to in her previous life. A framed photo of Claire and Ethan sat on the bookshelf, tucked just far enough back to seem inconspicuous. Sarah made a mental note of it. As the evening wore on, Sarah steered the conversation toward the past. "Do you ever think about how far we've come, Claire? I mean, from being broke college girls to planning my wedding?" Claire laughed nervously. "Yeah, it's been quite the journey." Sarah took a sip of wine, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You've always been there for me. I hope I've been as good a friend to you as you've been to me." Claire shifted uncomfortably. "Of course, Sarah. You're like a sister to me." "Like a sister," Sarah echoed, her voice soft but loaded with meaning. "I'm so lucky to have you in my life." Claire's smile faltered again, and Sarah knew she was getting closer to the truth. That night, as Sarah walked home, she felt the weight of their lies pressing down on her. But instead of despair, she felt a growing sense of purpose. "I'll expose them both," she vowed silently. "And I'll do it on my terms." Chapter 4, The First Crack in the Mask. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Sarah's family home as she prepared for yet another day of wedding planning. With a steaming cup of coffee in hand, she stared out at the garden, her thoughts clouded with suspicion. Claire's nervous reactions during their girls' night had been telling, but Sarah needed concrete evidence. Her memories from her past life painted a vivid picture of their betrayal, but this time, she wanted to catch them red-handed. Ethan arrived shortly after breakfast, his usual charming smile in place. He kissed her on the cheek, but Sarah noticed his lingering glance at his phone as it buzzed in his pocket. She raised an eyebrow. "Busy day?" "Just the usual wedding stuff," he replied, slipping his phone into his jacket. "Why don't we check out the venue together today?" Sarah suggested, her tone light. "I want us to finalize some details." Ethan hesitated for a moment. "I would, but I promised your dad I'd help him with a few things around the house. You know how he gets about fixing things himself." Sarah forced a smile. "Of course. I'll go with Claire instead, then." At the mention of Claire's name, Ethan's expression flickered, but he quickly covered it with a casual nod. "That's a great idea. She loves this kind of stuff." Later that day, Sarah and Claire arrived at the sprawling estate where the wedding was to take place. The venue was breathtaking, with manicured gardens, elegant arches, and a serene lake glistening in the distance. Claire was her usual chatty self, discussing floral arrangements and seating charts, but Sarah noticed her subtle avoidance of direct eye contact. As they walked through the grand hall, Sarah casually brought up Ethan. "He's been so busy lately, hasn't he? Sometimes I feel like we barely get time together." Claire's step faltered ever so slightly. "Well, that's normal, isn't it? Weddings are stressful." Sarah tilted her head, feigning curiosity. "True. But sometimes I wonder if he's keeping something from me." Claire's face tightened for a brief moment before she plastered on a reassuring smile. "Don't be silly, Sarah. Ethan adores you. You have nothing to worry about." Sarah nodded, but inside, her suspicion grew. She changed the subject, allowing Claire to regain her composure, all the while filing away every subtle reaction. That evening, Sarah returned home and decided it was time to dig deeper. She accessed Ethan's cloud account, something she had learned about in her previous life but never dared to investigate. As she scrolled through his messages, her breath caught in her throat. There it was, messages between Ethan and Claire, filled with affectionate words and plans to meet in secret. The betrayal was laid bare before her eyes. Tears threatened to spill, but Sarah swallowed them down. Her hands trembled, but not with sadness. This time, it was with resolve. Now I have proof, she thought. And I'll make them regret ever underestimating me. Chapter 5, The Revelation. The night Sarah uncovered the messages, she sat alone in her dimly lit bedroom, her laptop glowing like a beacon of betrayal. The words exchanged between Ethan and Claire scrolled endlessly before her eyes, each line confirming the truth she had long suspected. Can't wait to see you again. Last night was perfect. Don't worry about Sarah, she's so busy with the wedding, she won't even notice. Sarah's hands clenched into fists as she read on. They had been together for years, even during the times Ethan had claimed to be working late or visiting his family. Claire, her supposed best friend, had been a willing participant in this elaborate charade. The weight of their lies pressed heavily on Sarah's chest, but instead of breaking, she felt a fire ignite within her. This time, she wouldn't be the passive, self-sacrificing woman they had taken advantage of. This time, she would fight back. The next morning, Sarah began her day with a quiet determination. Over breakfast, Ethan greeted her with his usual charm, oblivious to the storm brewing within her. "Good morning, love. Did you sleep well?" he asked, leaning in to kiss her. Sarah offered a serene smile, masking her turmoil. "I did. Just a lot on my mind with the wedding coming up." "Well, don't stress. You know I'm here for you," Ethan said, his voice dripping with false reassurance. Sarah nodded, silently vowing that he would soon regret those words. Later that day, Sarah invited Claire over under the guise of discussing wedding details. She prepared tea and arranged the living room to appear cozy and inviting, all while carefully rehearsing her approach. Claire arrived with her usual air of confidence, though Sarah noticed a slight hesitation in her smile. "Hey, Sarah. What's up?" "I wanted to go over some final details for the wedding," Sarah said, her tone light and friendly. "But first, let's have some tea. I made your favorite." As they sipped their drinks, Sarah studied Claire closely, noting the way she avoided prolonged eye contact and fidgeted with her bracelet. "So, Claire," Sarah began casually, "do you think Ethan's been acting strange lately?" Claire froze for a split second before quickly recovering. "Strange? No, not at all. Why do you ask?" Sarah leaned back, feigning nonchalance. "Oh, just something I noticed. I guess planning a wedding can make you imagine things." Claire forced a laugh. "Exactly. You're probably just overthinking." Sarah's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "Maybe. Or maybe I've just been paying closer attention." Before Claire could respond, Sarah's phone buzzed on the coffee table. She deliberately glanced at the screen, letting Claire see Ethan's name flash across it. Claire's expression faltered, and Sarah knew she had hit a nerve. She didn't press further, yet. Instead, she allowed the silence to stretch, letting Claire squirm under her gaze. Inside, Sarah's resolve strengthened. She was done playing the victim. The game had begun, and she was ready to outsmart them both. Chapter 6, Laying the Trap. The day after Claire's visit, Sarah sat at her desk, staring at the damning messages she had uncovered. Every word, every promise Ethan made to Claire felt like a knife twisting in her chest. Yet, she wasn't broken. If anything, her anger had sharpened her focus. The Sarah of her past life might have cried for weeks, paralyzed by heartbreak. But this Sarah had a new purpose, justice. She knew confronting them outright wasn't enough. She needed a plan, a trap so airtight that their betrayal would be undeniable, not just to her, but to everyone around them. She opened her notebook, jotting down ideas as she pieced together a strategy. Step 1 was simple: act normal. Sarah knew she couldn't give Ethan or Claire any reason to suspect her knowledge. So, she went about her days with a calm demeanor, smiling when necessary, playing the role of a bride-to-be consumed with wedding planning. Ethan, ever the smooth liar, continued his charade. He brought her flowers, kissed her goodnight, and spoke about their future with practiced ease. Claire was equally convincing, texting Sarah wedding suggestions and offering to help with last-minute errands. But Sarah saw through their performances. One evening, as Ethan sat watching a football game, Sarah casually brought up an idea. "I was thinking," she began, "we should have a small dinner party before the wedding. Something intimate with just close friends and family." Ethan looked up, mildly surprised. "A dinner party? This close to the wedding? Won't that be too much?" Sarah smiled sweetly. "Not at all. It'll be a good chance to unwind and celebrate with the people we love most." Ethan hesitated for a moment before nodding. "If it makes you happy, let's do it." Sarah's mind raced as she finalized the details over the next few days. She invited only a handful of people: Ethan's parents, her own family, and of course, Claire. The plan was set. When the night of the dinner arrived, Sarah made sure everything was perfect. Candles flickered on the table, soft music played in the background, and the aroma of a homemade feast filled the air. She greeted her guests warmly, hiding the storm brewing inside her. Claire arrived last, looking radiant in a navy dress. "You've outdone yourself, Sarah," she said with a smile that no longer fooled Sarah. "Only the best for my favorite people," Sarah replied, hugging her tightly. Throughout the evening, Sarah observed them closely. Ethan and Claire were careful to keep their distance, but subtle glances and fleeting smiles betrayed them. They thought they were being discreet, but Sarah saw every move. As the dinner drew to a close, Sarah raised her glass for a toast. "To love, loyalty, and trust," she said, her voice steady but pointed. "May we always cherish the ones who truly deserve it." Her words hung in the air like a warning. Both Ethan and Claire avoided her gaze, their masks beginning to crack. The trap was set, and Sarah knew it was only a matter of time before they fell. Chapter 7: The strings begin to unravel. The morning after the dinner party, Sarah sat in her living room, her notebook open on the coffee table. The toast from the night before lingered in her mind. She could still see the discomfort flash across Ethan and Claire's faces, though they had quickly masked it with forced smiles. That was the first crack in their carefully constructed lies. Sarah decided it was time to escalate her plan. She couldn't rely solely on subtlety, she needed to turn the pressure up, slowly but deliberately. With her laptop in hand, she began crafting the next step in her trap, a fake email. She created a new account under the guise of an anonymous informant and drafted a message to Claire. "Dear Claire, I know what you've been up to with Ethan. If you don't come clean to Sarah, I'll make sure she finds out everything. You have 1 week. Consider this your only warning." Sarah stared at the screen, her heart racing as she pressed send. She imagined the panic Claire would feel upon receiving it. The beauty of the message was in its vagueness, it revealed nothing concrete, leaving Claire to fill in the gaps with her own guilt. The next step was to observe Claire's reaction. Sarah invited her over later that day under the pretense of needing help with wedding errands. When Claire arrived, her usual confidence seemed dimmed. She was quieter than usual, her laughter forced, and her hands fidgeted nervously. "Is everything okay?" Sarah asked, her voice laced with concern. Claire froze for a moment before forcing a smile. "Of course. Just a bit tired, that's all." Sarah nodded but said nothing more. She watched as Claire tried to distract herself by focusing on the task at hand, her nervous energy betraying her. That evening, Sarah turned her attention to Ethan. She needed to keep him on edge as well. Over dinner, she casually mentioned, "You know, I've been thinking about writing vows. Something really personal and meaningful." Ethan looked up, his fork pausing mid-air. "Vows? I thought we agreed to keep it simple." "I know," Sarah said, her tone innocent. "But I've been reflecting on what loyalty and trust mean in a marriage. Don't you think those are important foundations for a lifelong partnership?" Ethan's jaw tightened for a split second before he forced a laugh. "Of course, they are. You've been reading too many wedding blogs, haven't you?" Sarah smiled but said nothing, letting the silence speak louder than words. She could see the unease flicker in his eyes, and it gave her the resolve to push forward. That night, she lay in bed, her mind racing with the pieces of her plan coming together. Claire was cracking, Ethan was squirming, and she was one step closer to unraveling their lies completely. Soon, Sarah whispered to herself in the darkness. Very soon. Chapter 8, The Confrontation. The days following Sarah's calculated moves felt like an eternity. Every moment was charged with tension, and Sarah found herself constantly on edge. But the cracks in Ethan and Claire's facades were widening, and she knew the time for confrontation was nearing. It was early on a Saturday morning when Sarah finally decided to take the next step. Claire had been avoiding her calls for the past 2 days, and Ethan's attempts to act normal only felt more forced. Their lies had become so transparent, Sarah felt like she was living inside their web of deceit. It was time to cut through the tension and face the truth head-on. She invited Ethan to lunch that afternoon, choosing a quiet cafe tucked away from the bustling city. The air was thick with the kind of uncertainty that comes right before a storm. Sarah had always loved this cafe for its peaceful atmosphere, but today it felt like the perfect place for a storm of her own. Ethan arrived early, as he always did, and greeted Sarah with his usual warm smile. "Hey, beautiful. You look amazing as always." Sarah offered a tight smile in return. "Thanks." She didn't return the compliment, knowing it wasn't genuine anyway. They sat at their usual table, the one by the window that overlooked a small garden. But today, the garden felt distant, as if even nature knew something was about to break. Sarah watched as Ethan settled in, his body language tense despite his efforts to appear relaxed. "I've been thinking," Sarah began, her voice calm but filled with purpose. "About trust. And loyalty. Those are the 2 things that keep a relationship solid, don't you think?" Ethan nodded quickly, his fork clinking against his plate. "Of course, babe. That's the foundation of everything." Sarah leaned forward, her eyes narrowing slightly. "And what happens when that trust is broken? When you discover the person you love has betrayed you?" Ethan's expression faltered for a fraction of a second, and Sarah didn't miss it. "What are you talking about?" he asked, feigning confusion. Sarah's heart pounded, but she remained composed. "I know about you and Claire." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog. Ethan's face drained of color, and his hand went still on the edge of his glass. For a moment, he didn't speak, as if he were weighing his options, whether to deny it, try to explain, or outright lie. Sarah didn't wait for him to gather himself. She pulled out her phone and showed him the messages between him and Claire, the ones she had found days ago. "I know about the lies, Ethan. The late nights, the secret texts, the way you've used me." Ethan's eyes flicked nervously to the phone screen, then back to Sarah. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. You don't get to keep playing this game anymore, Sarah continued, her voice low but firm. I've been living in a lie, and I refuse to stay in it. You think I didn't know? You think I couldn't see how you two looked at each other, how you both were hiding something? I was the fool, Ethan. But not anymore. Ethan took a deep breath, finally breaking his silence. Sarah, I'm sorry. This wasn't supposed to happen like this. I never wanted to hurt you. Don't, Sarah interrupted, her voice cold. Don't apologize. Because this isn't about apologies anymore. This is about me. About my life. I'm done being the person who lets people walk all over her. I'm done being the person who sacrifices her happiness for others. Ethan's face contorted with guilt, but it didn't matter to Sarah. The truth had come to light, and nothing would erase the pain of betrayal. But one thing was certain, this was only the beginning. Sarah stood up, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. She looked at Ethan one last time. I'm done. Don't bother calling me again. With that, she walked away, leaving the cafe behind, leaving Ethan behind. And in that moment, she felt something inside her shift, a strength, a power she had never known before. This was her rebirth. And nothing would stand in her way now. Chapter 9, Taking Control. The next few days felt surreal to Sarah. The sting of betrayal still lingered, but it was now accompanied by a growing sense of empowerment. For so long, she had lived in the shadows of other people's choices, Ethan's and Claire's lies, her own self-doubt. But that was over. The confrontation had ignited something in her, something fierce and unstoppable. Sarah had been so focused on the pain of their betrayal that she hadn't realized how much of her own life had been spent sacrificing her own happiness for others. She had put her dreams on hold, ignored her own desires, and remained passive, hoping that love would somehow make everything okay. But love wasn't supposed to feel like a prison. She had started to rebuild herself after the confrontation, mentally, emotionally, and practically. The first step was distance. She moved into a new apartment, away from the life she had shared with Ethan. It wasn't easy, there were days when the loneliness threatened to drown her. But each day away from him felt like a small victory. She filled her space with things that made her feel good, a bookshelf stacked with books she had been meaning to read, art supplies for sketches she hadn't picked up in years, and a collection of plants that needed care, a reminder of how she had neglected her own growth in the past. Her work became a source of solace. She had always been good at her job, but now it was different. She threw herself into her career, taking on new projects and responsibilities with a renewed sense of confidence. Each task completed felt like another brick in the wall she was building around her heart. The work became more than just a way to distract herself, it was a way to reclaim her life, to prove to herself that she was capable of more than the woman who had been lied to and betrayed. But it wasn't just work. Sarah started to reconnect with her friends, the ones she had pushed aside for Ethan and Claire. She went out for drinks with old colleagues, laughed with them until her stomach hurt, and rediscovered parts of herself she thought she had lost. She took a painting class and spent her weekends wandering art galleries, losing herself in colors and textures that spoke to her in ways words never could. Slowly, but surely, she was finding herself again. It wasn't just about filling her time, it was about filling her life with things that were hers, things that didn't depend on someone else's love or approval. For the first time in a long time, Sarah felt in control. One evening, as she sat on her balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in vibrant oranges and pinks, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Claire. "We need to talk. Can we meet up?" Sarah stared at the message, feeling a mix of curiosity and wariness. She had already made up her mind about Claire and Ethan, but she couldn't deny that part of her was curious about what Claire would say. It had been days since the confrontation, and Sarah knew she wasn't the same person anymore. She had no reason to go back to the past, but she was curious if Claire had anything of value to offer. With a steady finger, Sarah typed a response, "I'm not interested in hearing any more lies." She hit send and placed her phone down on the table. She wasn't going to let them control her anymore, not her emotions, not her decisions. If Claire wanted to talk, fine. But Sarah wasn't going to listen to apologies or justifications. She had already walked away from that life. She was done being the victim. Now, she was the one in control. Chapter 10, Reclaiming My Life. The silence that followed Sarah's message to Claire was deafening. As the days passed, Sarah felt a strange sense of peace. She had done what was necessary, set the boundaries, walked away, and left behind the toxic people who had once been so central to her life. But now, as she continued to rebuild herself, something inside her urged her to focus on what truly mattered, her future, her happiness, her independence. She couldn't keep looking back, not when her life had so much more potential than the shadows of betrayal that had once loomed over her. Sarah had spent so much of her life accommodating others, first her parents' expectations, then Ethan's and Claire's desires, putting her dreams on hold for the sake of relationships that weren't even real. Now, the weight of all that had been lifted, and she was free. Free to do whatever she wanted, free to finally pursue her own goals, free to shape her destiny. One morning, as Sarah sipped her coffee on the balcony of her new apartment, she made a decision. She had always dreamed of traveling, of exploring the world, of seeing places she had only read about in books. But somehow, between school, work, and relationships, that dream had always remained just that, a dream. But now, there was nothing holding her back. No one to answer to. No obligations to fulfill. She grabbed her phone and, with a steady hand, booked a flight to a destination she had always wanted to visit, Bali. The thought of exploring tropical beaches, ancient temples, and vibrant local culture filled her with excitement and anticipation. It wasn't just about the destination, it was about taking the first step toward the life she had always imagined but had been too afraid to live. The next few weeks were filled with preparations. She researched the best places to visit, the most beautiful beaches to relax on, and the most fascinating cultural sites to explore. She even enrolled in a short course on photography, something she had always wanted to try but had never made time for. She wanted to capture the beauty of the world through her lens, to make memories she could look back on and feel proud of. She wanted to make this trip her own. At work, Sarah's confidence continued to soar. She had always been good at what she did, but now, she wasn't afraid to take on more challenging projects or voice her opinions in meetings. She had developed a new sense of self-respect, a realization that her worth wasn't tied to how others saw her, but to how she saw herself. And with that newfound self-assurance, she began to climb the ranks in her company, taking on leadership roles that once felt out of reach. But despite her growing success, there was still a part of her that had to confront the emotional scars left by Ethan and Claire. They had been a part of her life for so long, and their betrayal hadn't just shaken her, it had shaped her. She needed closure. Not for them, but for herself. So, one afternoon, she met with Claire. The meeting was quiet, tense, but civil. Sarah listened as Claire apologized, as she tried to explain herself, but Sarah didn't need any more explanations. She had heard it all before, and it no longer mattered. What mattered was that she was free, free to live without the burden of their lies. When the conversation ended, Sarah didn't feel anger, but a sense of finality. She had let go. And in that moment, she realized something profound. She had spent so much time being hurt, but now she was choosing to heal. She wasn't going to be the woman who allowed someone else's actions to define her. As Sarah left the meeting, she looked at the horizon ahead, bright, full of possibilities. This was just the beginning of her new life, and she was finally ready to embrace it with open arms. Chapter 11, The Awakening. In the weeks following her trip to Bali, Sarah felt like a different person. The beauty of the island, the serenity of the beaches, and the richness of the culture had inspired something deep within her. The journey had been transformative, not just in terms of the places she had visited, but in the way she had rediscovered herself. The clarity she had gained there was now unfolding in her everyday life, guiding her through a period of deep self-reflection and growth. Sarah had started to recognize that the person she had been before, lost in a cycle of self-sacrifice, guilt, and heartache, was no longer who she wanted to be. She had allowed herself to be defined by others for too long. Now, it was time for her to redefine herself on her own terms, to live a life that truly reflected her own values and desires. Back in her apartment, surrounded by the warmth of familiar surroundings, Sarah began to immerse herself fully in her passions. The photography course she had signed up for before her trip had reignited her creativity. She spent hours exploring the city, capturing the everyday beauty that often went unnoticed, the golden glow of sunset filtering through trees, the laughter of children playing in the park, the quiet solitude of a lone street lamp flickering in the dark. Photography had become a lens through which she could see the world and herself in a new light. Her professional life continued to flourish as well. Sarah had begun to take on more leadership responsibilities at work, confidently stepping into roles she would have once thought were beyond her reach. She had finally embraced her own potential, pushing herself to excel in ways she never had before. Her colleagues took notice of her newfound self-assurance, and she earned the respect she had always deserved. But the most rewarding part of her career journey wasn't just the promotions or the recognition, it was the satisfaction of knowing that she was doing it for herself. She wasn't chasing approval or validation from anyone. She was simply living her truth. Yet, despite the progress she had made in her personal and professional life, there was still a lingering feeling within Sarah, a quiet whisper that told her she needed to face the ghosts of her past more directly. The betrayal of Ethan and Claire had cut deep, but Sarah had only confronted them in a distant, detached way. She had moved forward, yes, but she hadn't fully allowed herself to feel the weight of what had happened and how it had affected her. It wasn't about seeking revenge or gaining closure from them anymore, it was about giving herself the space to grieve, to mourn the loss of the future she had envisioned with Ethan, the relationship that had once seemed perfect, the friendship with Claire that had once felt like family. It was about acknowledging the pain and letting it wash over her, without fear or shame. So, one evening, Sarah found herself sitting at the small table in her apartment, a glass of wine in hand, and allowed herself to cry. Not because she missed Ethan or Claire, but because she had been hurt. She let herself feel the full weight of the loss, without trying to minimize it or push it away. She needed this moment of release, of vulnerability, to fully embrace the next stage of her life. As the tears fell, Sarah felt a sense of release, like a weight had been lifted from her chest. And as the last of her sobs faded, she felt a quiet sense of peace settle in. She had mourned the loss, and now she was ready to truly let go. The rebirth that had begun months ago was now complete. She was no longer the woman who had been betrayed. She was the woman who had chosen to heal, to move forward, and to reclaim her life on her own terms. And she was ready for whatever came next. Chapter 12, Rebuilding Trust. Sarah's new life felt like a delicate tapestry, woven together with threads of newfound strength, resilience, and hope. But as she walked through her day-to-day life, she realized that there was one final step in her journey of transformation, rebuilding trust. For years, Sarah had been betrayed by the two people she had loved and trusted most. Ethan, the man she had imagined spending her life with, and Claire, her best friend, had shattered the foundations of her world with their lies and deceit. The betrayal had cut deeper than she had ever allowed herself to admit, leaving scars on her heart that had taken time to heal. But now, as she moved forward, she recognized that if she wanted to live the full, rich life she envisioned for herself, she had to allow herself to trust again, not just others, but herself as well. Her first step was understanding that rebuilding trust didn't mean forgetting the past or pretending it didn't hurt. Instead, it was about learning from the pain and using it to fuel her growth. Trust was something that had to be earned, both from others and from herself, and Sarah was ready to take that step. At work, Sarah found herself reconnecting with her colleagues on a deeper level. She had once kept everyone at arm's length, too afraid of being hurt again, but now she was opening up to the idea of building genuine relationships. She made an effort to show up for her team, to share her thoughts, and to listen to theirs. She had learned that trusting people didn't mean giving them free rein over her life, it meant establishing boundaries and communicating openly. Slowly but surely, she built a sense of camaraderie with her coworkers, and for the first time in a long while, she felt like part of something bigger than herself. In her personal life, Sarah also began to let down her walls. She met new people, friends, acquaintances, and allowed herself to form connections. She wasn't in a rush to trust, but she no longer lived in fear of being hurt. She took things one step at a time, carefully weighing each relationship, observing the actions of others, and listening to her intuition. It was liberating to realize that she didn't have to protect herself from everything, that not everyone in the world would betray her, that there were people who valued her for who she truly was. But the most significant relationship Sarah worked on was the one with herself. In the past, she had been quick to dismiss her own needs, her own desires, in favor of others. She had allowed Ethan and Claire's actions to make her doubt her own judgment, to question her worth. But now, she was finally giving herself the gift of trust. She trusted her instincts, her abilities, and her capacity for happiness. She recognized that her past mistakes didn't define her, what mattered was how she chose to move forward. One evening, as Sarah sat by the window in her apartment, she reflected on how far she had come. The pain of the past no longer dominated her thoughts, nor did it hold her back from pursuing her goals. She had learned to forgive herself for the mistakes she had made, the times she had ignored the red flags and allowed herself to be taken for granted. More than that, she had learned to trust her ability to make better choices moving forward. The journey to rebuild trust had not been easy. It had required Sarah to be vulnerable, to face her fears head-on, and to let go of the bitterness that had once consumed her. But now, as she gazed out at the city skyline, she realized that she had achieved something even greater than she had imagined. She had rediscovered her own strength, her own worth, and in doing so, had built a future that was hers alone to create. And for the first time in a long time, Sarah smiled, genuinely, deeply, and without hesitation. She was ready to embrace the next chapter of her life with trust in her heart and the world at her feet. Chapter 13, A New Beginning. Sarah stood at the edge of the bustling city park, her heart beating steadily with a sense of anticipation. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm golden hue over the trees, and the world around her seemed to slow down. For the first time in years, she felt truly present, no longer weighed down by the past, but completely alive in the moment. Her journey had brought her here, and she knew that this was just the beginning. It had been a year since she had forgiven Ethan and Claire, and even longer since she had begun the process of reclaiming herself. What had once seemed like a mountain of hurt and betrayal had now become a series of lessons and turning points. She had grown into someone she hardly recognized, a woman who had learned to trust herself, to pursue her passions without fear, and to build a life that reflected who she truly was. Sarah's phone buzzed in her pocket, and she pulled it out to see a message from her best friend, Emily. "Hey, want to grab coffee tomorrow? I've been thinking about how far you've come, and I'm so proud of you." A smile tugged at the corners of Sarah's lips. Emily had been there for her through every twist and turn of this journey, offering unwavering support when Sarah had needed it most. Emily's friendship had reminded her that, even in the darkest moments, she wasn't alone. Of course, Sarah typed back, her fingers flying over the screen. I've got so much to tell you. She sent the message and put her phone away, looking around the park as she took in the fresh air. There were children playing in the distance, couples strolling hand in hand, and people enjoying the warmth of the day. For once, Sarah didn't feel like an outsider. She felt like she belonged here, in this moment, and in her own life. As she walked toward the nearby cafe, she reflected on everything she had learned. Forgiveness had been the catalyst, but it had been her own strength and determination that had carried her through. She had stopped waiting for someone else to fix her, stopped hoping for external validation. She had learned to fix herself. The past had shaped her, but it no longer controlled her. Her mind wandered to the future, her writing career, the new friendships she was cultivating, and the life she was building. It was all possible because she had chosen to reclaim her power. It wasn't just about the love she had lost, it was about the love she had found within herself. For so long, she had defined herself by her relationships with others, but now, she realized that her worth came from within. She had built a foundation of self-respect, and now she was ready to build the rest of her life on top of it. She thought of her writing, her stories, her words, and the impact she could have. She wanted to inspire others the way she had been inspired by her own growth. She wanted her work to be a testament to resilience, to the ability to rise from the ashes of pain and become something even stronger. Walking into the cafe, Sarah felt a sense of excitement bubble up inside her. She had a new chapter to write, not just for her career, but for her life. She had rediscovered her voice, and now it was time to share it with the world. As she took a seat at a table, waiting for Emily to arrive, Sarah felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Her life was no longer defined by betrayal or heartbreak. She was no longer a victim, she was the author of her own story. For the first time in a long time, Sarah felt truly free. And in that freedom, she saw endless possibilities. She didn't know exactly what the future would hold, but she was ready to face it, head on, with confidence and a heart full of hope. The journey of healing had led her to this point. And now, with the past behind her, Sarah was ready to embrace whatever came next. This was her new beginning. And she would make it everything she had ever dreamed of. Know your turn. Thank you for joining Sarah on her incredible journey of self-discovery and empowerment. If you found her story inspiring, and you're ready to embrace your own transformation, don't forget to like this video and share it with anyone who may need a reminder of their own strength. If you want to hear more powerful stories of resilience, growth, and overcoming life's challenges, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Remember, no matter where you are in your journey, it's never too late to rewrite your story. You have the power to rise, rebuild, and become the person you were always meant to be. Let's continue this journey together. Leave a comment below sharing your thoughts, your own experiences, or how Sarah's story has impacted you. Let's keep the conversation going, and inspire each other to live our best lives.